Hello, today's webinar is brought to you by Sources for Community Independent Living and the Broyles Foundation. Betsy Broyles Arnold is here with us today to bring some helpful information to caregivers about Alzheimer's and dementia. Betsy is the daughter of Frank and Barbara Broyles. She has co-authored Coach Broyles Playbook for Alzheimer's caregivers and has 20 plus years of experience providing care for Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers. Without further ado, I will let Betsy take the virtual stage.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here today. One of my favorite things to do is to, visit with caregivers and help them understand this disease and kind of what they're facing. So, today we're going to talk about the, early signs and symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Okay, let's see. I'm having okay, there we go. So I like to kind of start off by just showing this is kind of a montage of my family. So that way, when I'm talking about people, you'll kind of have an understanding of who I'm talking to. So this is my mother, the main pictures here. And then, so my dad had this made after my mom passed away. And on the left-hand side of the montage are kind of their early years together. When they're standing on the steps, that was their first date. It was a dance. And then I, in the middle was kind of their middle lives. And I have 4 older brothers and a twin sister, Linda. That's she and I in the middle of the picture. And Linda helped me, take care of my mother too, and my dad. And then at the end of on the right-hand side of the montage, or my right anyway, the picture with all the kids was the last picture my mom took one Christmas with all the grandkids who were there. So, this is kind of my family and my mom. So I refer to her as BB, and I will, kind of refer to as her, throughout this talk, because generally a lot of this experience comes from my mom. And so, or sometimes I'll do there, but anyway, so this is my family. And then I love this quote. It says, if you want tomorrow to be better than today, you have to learn something in order to change it. And so, thank you for joining in today. And it's so important to really educate yourself on this disease. It really makes a huge difference. Just the difference between my mother's experience and my dad's experience was astronomical because, we were educated, especially, my dad was a much easier ride than it was with my mother. So again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it greatly. So we're just going to kind of jump right in here. And some of the questions that I get a lot are, what is dementia? What is Alzheimer's? So, dementia is really just a medical word that is used when there are changes occurring in the brain. There are several changes. The first one is short-term memory loss, okay? And then later in the disease, it's long-term. It changes how people talk. They begin to have trouble finding the words, they begin substituting words. It changes how people act. Like with my mother in particular, and I'm going to talk a lot about the signs that affected her, is one of the first things that she did was withdraw. She withdrew from, teaching Sunday school, and she tutored literacy and all these different things. So they withdraw because, they don't want anyone to see that they're having issues. And then, they begin to have trouble doing normal activities. One of the early things with my mom too was very early was, she couldn't balance the checkbook. She had a difficult time following a recipe. And then later, as with their cognitive abilities, they have trouble dressing and bathing and things like that. So if you think about dementia, here's the way I like to explain it. If you think about cancer, okay, cancer is the overall umbrella. And then you have prostate cancer and breast cancer and, all the different cancers that go underneath the umbrella. So if you think about dementia is the overall umbrella. And then you have Lewy bodies dementia and, Alzheimer's being the most common dementia, but also ALS and Parkinson's are underneath the dementia umbrella. So anything relating to the brain is underneath the dementia umbrella. So I hope that kind of helps, because people, I know I did for a long time, had a hard time, what is dementia? What is Alzheimer's? And so, all right. So one of the things that's really interesting, I want to go into a few things about the disease, to begin with. And so because of the playbook and my dad being a coach, we use a lot of football terminology. So the first part of this is know your opponent, know your opponent, the disease. And so one of the things that I find that's so interesting about this disease is, they live moment to moment to moment. Okay. So if you took your hands and you went up and down like this, like you're going up and down rolling hills, when they're on top of the hill, they understand everything going on around them, who they're with, what they're doing, and they're okay with it. But when they slide down in the valley, then, you will see changes, in their facial expression and in their body language. And so and then, in that moment, they're confused, they don't fully understand maybe where they are or who they're with or what they're doing. And so it's really important, to kind of learn, are they up here on top of the hill or are they in the valley? Because when they're in the valley and they're already confused is a time when you don't want to ask them to do anything because they're already confused and unsure. And so one of the things that I noticed too about my mom and my dad for that matter, but if you think about an airplane, this is how the disease would go. She would kind of clip along and then she would take a dip down. And in that dip, we would notice changes. And my sister and I, who helped me take care of my mom, we would be like, gosh, look at these changes. What does this mean? But what we noticed is she would always come back up. She just didn't come up as high as she was. And then she would clip along and she would take another dip. So that's kind of, how the disease progresses. But so people dealing with this disease, they live moment to moment to moment. So it's really important as this disease progresses is that, you want to always ask yourself, what moment is she in? Is she on top of the hill or is she in the valley? And so we'll get into that more later. So the other thing that I found very interesting about this disease is that as the disease progresses, their age is regressing. And so from a caregiver standpoint, you want to try to figure out where they are in this age regression because it will help you to be able to communicate with them. So you ask yourself, well, how do I do that? Well, if you listen very carefully to things that they say, it will give you insight into where they are. For example, if a husband is looking for his wife and his wife walks in the room and in that moment, okay, he's in the valley, he doesn't recognize her, then perhaps he is maybe between age 20 to age 40 because he knows he's married, but he doesn't recognize her because she's gray-headed. Okay, so if a mother is looking for her children and her children walk in the room and in that moment she doesn't recognize them, okay, she's in the valley, then perhaps she's in her 20s to early 30s because she's thinking of her children when they're young. And then when they start asking for their parents or their mother, which they always do, then they're in their adolescence. And so according to the Alzheimer's Association, this is some of the statistics they have, but in the early, probably should take this off because I'm not sure I fully agree with this, even though I am not a doctor. I need to make that clear. But what they say is in the early stage, they travel all the way back to 8 years old. But that can be deceiving because it's moment to moment, Anyway, so things that they say, stories and things that they say to you throughout the disease will help you understand where they are. I'm gonna give you an example. Like my dad. One time I was driving my dad to lunch. He was having a lunch with some of his former football players. And so I would always prep him and I'd say, well, Dad, we're going to lunch, we're going to Catfish Hole. And I said, Dad, we're meeting some of your players. And then I looked at him and I said, Dad, a lot of them are from your national championship team. And he looked at me and he said, did we win a national championship? Well, as shocking as that was to hear, because I was educated, see what that's telling me now is, okay, he is back past 1964. So he's not going to understand or be able to talk about things, especially in that moment, but most likely in general, any time from 1964 to the present, because they travel back in time. Okay. So let's see to me, this is really important here because this is their main disability. Their main disability is short-term memory loss. And it seems like a really easy concept to understand, but it's not. It takes years to fully comprehend what that means. I mean, it did me, so, what does that mean? Their brain cannot hold any recent memory. They can't really tell you what they had for lunch, if they ate lunch, and so what's interesting about, if we go back to living moment to moment, when they're on top of that hill, and they fully understand everything that's going on in the conversation. I'm gonna give you another example with my dad. I could sit and I could talk to my dad, and when he was on top of the hill, he understood everything I was saying. He could articulate things back to me. I mean, there were times I think, gosh, does he really have Alzheimer's? This is so good, what he's saying. They can, they're in the moment, and when they're on top of their game, they can talk to you and have a conversation. What's difficult about it is then it's gone. It may be 5 minutes, it may be 7 minutes, and then it gets to where it's more like 2 minutes. So having those conversations when they're on top of the hill, and you're in that moment with them, cherish every one of those, because they are in the moment, they're understanding everything you're saying, and actually articulating things back to you. It's wonderful. My dad was so good at it, then it would be gone. So it's hard to fully grasp that they don't remember. They don't remember conversations, they don't remember these things. And that's what, when I say it takes a long time to fully understand it, that's what I mean is it does. It's just hard to comprehend that you can have a conversation with someone and then they don't remember it. So it's really hard, and it's really hard when it's important conversations and you've had these conversations with them, and then they're like, well, you never told me that. That's a whole nother talk. But anyway, so their main disability is short-term memory loss. Now, their other main disability, I would say short-term memory loss is number one. Their second disability is, actually, I forgot to add this line. So let's go into that. So their disability, okay, short-term memory loss, and then it's long-term memory, okay? So what are long-term memories? They're just memories we have of our past, okay? And so what's really interesting about this disease is their long-term memories last really all the way through pretty much as long as they can articulate things to you. I mean, if you take the middle stage, I look at this disease as a early, middle, or now they call it more moderate, and then the end stage. And so long-term memories will last all the way through just about all of the middle or moderate stage. It's always amazing because you're like, how do they remember that? Well, it's long-term. They can't tell you what they did 5 minutes ago, what they did a year ago, 10 years ago, and then 20, as the story I just mentioned about my dad. He got to where he couldn't remember anything earlier than 1964. But talking about the growing up and their youth and their family, and even into their teenage years and early college a lot, or the early 20s, they can talk about for a long time. Okay, so some of the things that that's interesting that they will forget, and is like with my dad especially, was children's grandkids' names. My dad knew that he knew them. There's that emotional memory. They never lose their emotional memory. So interesting. It took me years to really fully understand that. But he would see the kids, he would recognize them, then he'd look at me and he'd go, now what is that one's name and who do they go with? Because there's 6 of us. And so he was always asking that. But anyway, so short-term memory they have throughout the disease. Long-term memories are good. And then as you near the end of the middle stage, those memories start to fade away too. So the second main disability that they have is they begin to lose their cognitive abilities. So, what do I mean by that? What is cognition? Cognition has to do with how a person understands and acts in this world. It's their set of abilities, their skills, their processes that are part of nearly every human action. Okay, think about that. Part of nearly every human action is a cognitive ability. So I'm going to give you an example. So answering a telephone, Something as simple as that requires 4 cognitive abilities. So the first one is perception. When the phone rings, do they hear the ring and can they say, oh, that's the phone ringing? Okay, perception. The second one is decision taking. Do I answer the phone or do I not answer the phone? Okay. The third one is motor skills. Do they have the ability to reach down and pick up the phone or walk across the room and answer the phone? And then the fourth one is language. Can they pick up the phone and talk to you and understand what it is you're saying and then articulate things back? So something as simple as answering a telephone requires 4 cognitive abilities. So as your loved one moves into the middle or more moderate stage, then that's when you begin to see them losing their cognitive abilities. They can't, trying to give you a good example. Dressing, for example, they can't remember how to put their clothes on or put their shoes on, or, just simple things that they've always done, how to set a table, things that they have done all of their life. They just begin to lose that. And that's difficult not only on them, but also on you. So there are 2 main disabilities: short-term memory loss, and they lose their cognitive abilities. Okay, so now we're going into pregame planning, okay? And so we're going to talk about the early signs here. And so, these are a lot of things that, we really noticed with my mother, but are also very true to any list that you see on anybody's side of early signs. So, my mother, she would misplace her keys, or we would find them in a funny place. Of course, I didn't live here in the beginning, but my sister did. So here's some of the early signs: misplace their keys. They will put their glasses in an unusual place and not be able to find them. They will look up a recipe, or generally it's recipes that they've had in their mind, for a long time. How good cooks, they don't need a recipe. They get to where they can't remember how to cook a dish, or they definitely can't follow a recipe. They'll start things and not finish. They just begin to start having a harder time with tasks that they have done, their whole life. And so one of the things that I do tell people is, I say it's important, to early on, if you can get them to keep a list, write things down, so they can look at the list, because the problem is because their disability is short-term memory loss. Many times they'll write the list, set it down, and forget they ever wrote the list. But if you can get them to do a list is really good. So another thing, if you think about the definition of dementia is, they begin, it changes how people act. One of the early signs with my mom, really early on, is she could not balance the checkbook. And it was devastating. She actually called my dad crying. And that was really when we actually, took her for the first time and had her tested. But my mom developed the disease in the 90s. And so it was very difficult to diagnose it back then. And they just would tell you that they'd had a stroke and it's affected their short-term memory. So that's what they told us for years with my mom, but she could not do numbers, and then it was, she'd forget to mail the bills, or she would, checks would be returned where she hadn't signed them, or she didn't put the name of the place, or she put the wrong name. There's all different, different things you can do with signing a check and sending it to the wrong person. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hay fever attack. So then one of the big things that, my mom, when she was 69, of course, it seems so old back then. Now I realize how young it is. And the scary thing is I do all those things I just mentioned. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But so one of the things that we really, probably the very first thing with my mom is, she called us one day and she said, I'm just going to back out of everything. And, at the time I thought, gosh, she'd been doing these things for 40 years, teaching Sunday school. She tutored adults, she tutored children. She worked with all kinds of organizations. And so, I thought to myself, she's 69, she's probably tired, how you can excuse things away. And so, but now we know it's one of the first things that they do, that they back away. They don't want people to see that they're having problems with things. Another example is they'll stop doing, normal activities. They'll stop meeting with friends or playing cards or playing golf, or, they will, she, kind of stop leaving the house by herself. They'll stop visiting with friends on the phone. I mean, they just withdraw because they do not want anyone to realize that they're having a problem. I mean, that's the main reason why they do it. And that's why people hide it and have it for so many years, is because unless you're with them all the time, where you can observe them, it's hard to see exactly where they are, because they can be good for a good long period of time, and then they will show some kind of sign. And so withdrawal is a biggie. I mean, when they start to withdraw for things, that's something that you really got to look at. So driving issues, with my mom, some of the things that we noticed is, she would pull up to a stoplight and then she would pull through it like a stop sign. And of course she would do the, come out of the grocery store and couldn't find it. But what really was the big thing that happened with my mom when we finally had her diagnosed is, she came home one day, and my brother Tommy and his wife Tisha, they lived behind my parents. And so my mom called Tisha and said, can you come up here? I just can't figure out how to turn this thing off. And it was the car. And so that's finally when my dad took her back and had her tested again. And that's when she was finally diagnosed. So, that's a big one. Driving is a tough situation, and we're going to get into that again later, but driving is difficult. And I'm going to make this point now because I'll probably make it again later. But once they've been diagnosed, okay, then you have to really be careful, because if they were to get in an accident, you could be sued because there was a diagnosis and you're supposed to make them quit driving. But we will get more into that here shortly. So, but driving, it's a big one. My mom wasn't as bad as my dad, but it was devastating to my dad because that's her independence. But we would say to my dad, isn't it great to have a driver? I'd look at him and say, I wish I had a driver, that someone would drive me every day. Consider yourself lucky. And then his friend Daryl Royal, he used to be the coach at Texas. He had Alzheimer's too. It was really sad. But, I'd always say, Daryl has a driver. And so he'd be like, yeah, he does have a driver. So we'll get more into that later, but driving issues really are, that's probably one of the most difficult things. So, all right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about communication issues, still in the pregame planning. Some of the things that you'll see is, they just have finding the words. They hesitate a lot more when they're speaking. They substitute words, like car rack instead of clothes rack. Thingamajiggy, or what is that called? My mom would go, what was that thing? So, and they would, they'll begin to ask the same question over and over. And so with my mom, we could step in and and answer whatever it was she was trying to say. Because, we figured, we knew her, we understood what she was trying to say. We would finish her sentences, and it didn't really upset her. So that's something where, this disease is trial and error. You try things, and, if that works for your loved one, then that's great, but if they don't like you stepping in and finishing their sentences for them, then that is something that you definitely don't want to do. When they talk about asking a question over and over, what I learned in our experience is that, they have a thought. It's important to them. Here's the key. It's an important thought. That's why they ask you the question over and over. They ask you the question, you answer it. What is their disability? Short-term memory loss. So they forget that you answered the question, but yet the question is still in their mind and it's important. So they ask it again. So when your loved one starts doing those things, you just want to redirect her thought process into something else, so she will kind of get off that question. But I think it's important to know that it's really important to them. That's why they keep asking the question. Once I figured that out, it made it much easier when I was dealing, with my mom. So Two, I think it's important. I'm gonna touch on this just a little bit, but I think that, when you're in the early stage and you have question about, gosh, is my mom, generally take something like my mom calling my sister-in-law, asking her to come up here because she can't figure out how to turn off the car. Something generally like that happens, something kind of big. They get lost, they get in an accident, something that causes you to say, okay, we have a problem. We can't explain this away anymore because sometimes we know it here, but we can't here. I mean, that's exactly the way I was, especially with my dad, when I noticed he was developing the disease. And so, a lot of people ask me all the time, they don't even know where to go. And so really, if in your area, if you have a neuropsychologist, they are the best people to take them. There are numerous in the Northwest area, Northwest Arkansas area, and most big cities have them, but they do the full testing and they will help you understand, because many times, I mean, it can be another underlying issue that they're dealing with that is causing them to have these problems. So when you're talking to your loved one about going to the doctor, I think it's important that, just to have physicals, because there can be other underlying issues that are causing them not to think straight and to have short-term memory. And so, it's important to go just so you have a good idea of what your loved one is dealing with. So, here are some questions, a list of questions that you can ask your doctor. I think it's really important, and I have this somewhere, but I think it's extremely important. One of the things that I did every time I took my mom or my dad to the doctor was I called the nurse the day before, or you can email them, and I would say, these are the problems we're dealing with. I need you to know this because it's very difficult to talk about your loved one in front of your loved one, because what is their disability? Short-term memory loss. And so when you start to talk about changes going on with her, she's going to look at you and she's going to deny it. I don't do that, and it's very awkward and it's very hard. So anytime you go to the doctor, if you can email the nurse or call the nurse and talk to her, these are the problems we're having. It's difficult to say in front of her. But so some of the list of questions that when you're going into the doctor for the first time, you want to talk about, what's occurring with your loved one, the changes that you've seen, how long it's been, you can ask them, are there medicines? There's Aricept and there's Namenda, there's other, Aricept is more early stage, Namenda is more of a middle stage, but the two together as a cocktail do really well. And actually Namenda has a Namenda XR, which has both of the medicines put together. And so, but you want to ask them questions about the medicine. Are there ways to help pay for the medicine? Can she stay alone? Is it safe for her to drive? What services, in my town can I reach out to, area agency on agings and things like that, to get help? Reach out to us, reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. There's this meeting center here. You're very lucky in Northwest Arkansas. There are a lot of good organizations that can help you. Okay. And it's hard in the beginning and it's hard to get them to go. But I think if you can, it's good to take them and get them tested. So here's where I talk about, describing your issues. Very, very, very important. Okay. I think it's critical because it is so hard to talk about your love, especially your mom or your spouse, either way. You want to express to the doctor what's going on. They need a good understanding so you don't have to articulate it again in front of them. Okay. And then the doctor will ask y'all questions too. And so I think it's important. One of the things that I noticed with my mom is that the doctor, once she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the doctor would look at me and ask questions. And then when we would walk out, my mom would get irritated and she'd say, why is he looking at you and not me? And I would go, I don't know, Mom, that is so weird. I mean, we ended up having to quit going to this doctor because he would look at me, and I would email and say, please don't look at me. You talk to her and let her answer, and then, I'll shake yes or no, beside her. But it's really important that they talk to them and give them that respect and that dignity. Okay. So most of the doctors today don't do that. They that deal with this disease, they will look at her, but that's really important. It really upset my mom, and I'd be like, I have no idea why they are looking at me. And so kind of one of those awkward moments. So the doctor's going to ask you questions, when it first started, different things like that. That's why I think it's important that you email them, and then they're going to run different tests. They're going to run blood tests. They're going to, probably do a scan, but the neuropsychologists that do the big testing, it takes like 2 or 3 hours. Please don't discuss that with your loved one. You just say the doctor's going to run some tests. You don't know what they are. Let them go in and do it, because you'll frighten them a little bit. But with the tests that they do can really help them determine what parts of the brain, or if there are other that are affected, or if there are other things that other underlying health issues that they have. So, but they will order some different tests, and that's a good thing. That's a positive. So playing offense now, you got to take care of yourself. As they say in football, you got to protect the quarterback. And so I like to say that this is a season in your life, and, we can do anything in this life that we need to, but what you do in this season is going to determine your next season. And so it's really crucial that you take care of yourself. And I mean, you got to exercise, you got to eat right. I'm one of these that can say I did everything wrong while taking care of my mom, especially. But so, I moved in with my family. I probably should have gone through the story a little bit, but I moved in with my mom and dad, and I lived with them the last probably 2.5, 3 years of my mom's life. And so I was here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as caregivers, the main caregiver, they do go through no one can do it as good as I can, even though I knew my sister could, because she came, Monday through Friday, 9, we were the sandwich generations. Our kids were 12 and 13. Linda's were 12, maybe 14 and 16, when my mother really developed this disease. And so, we were taking care of our kids and taking care of her, and we'd have to go pick them up at school and things like that. So it wasn't easy, by any means. And this disease is a life changer. I mean, it really is. But it's critical that you get into good habits early, and exercising and eating healthy, and spending time with your friends, and doing things that you enjoy doing are so important. And you just got to kind of set these things up with your family. It's important to do this because there's a huge range of emotions that caregivers go through. There's sadness. If it's a spouse, spouse is worse than a parent, but a parent to me was extremely bad, but I can't even imagine with the spouse. It is different, but there's this huge sense of loss. There's stress and strain because you're pulled. And like in my situation, I was always having to choose. My husband became disabled during this process. And so I had him, I had my children, I had my mom, and I had my dad, and always having to choose is very difficult when you're doing it all day long every day. And my mom generally won because she needed me the most. And so it was hard trying to, I couldn't even explain to my kids about the disease because I didn't understand it enough to be able to explain it to them. And so, it was hard, but there's a lot of anxiety and anger and guilt. There's so much guilt associated with this disease from the caregiver standpoint, isolation, especially as the disease, progresses, but you feel like you're letting everybody down. You're not doing anything the way you want to be able to do it. And so there's just a lot of guilt. There's a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, and these are all very normal feelings. I like to tell caregivers, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And so caregivers go through, they go through a lot. So it's important to have someone that you can talk to. I mean, go to a support group, call us, a friend, a family member. I at least had my sister. And then when my husband became disabled, there were two other people that fully understood what we were going through, because no one really understands what you're dealing with unless you've lived it. And so very important to, get some help early. You gotta reach out and you got to start the process, because becoming a caregiver is a whole new world, and you step into it and you don't really realize what you're stepping into when you're doing it, because you just, boom, you find yourself there, and then you're just trying to survive. And, honestly, I was just trying to keep my head above water, most of the time that I was taking care of my mom, especially. So, and also what makes it hard too is, the roles change. I become more the mother, and my mother was more like a child, and those role reversals are hard. It's hard to navigate, but there's just, so many things that they've done that they can't do anymore that you have to take over. It's just a lot of responsibility. And so, it's why, again, it's important to have someone that you can talk to, and to have an outlet where you can get out and do things and enjoy and have some time to yourself. It's very, very, very important. So when you become a caregiver, just what I was talking about, you got to have a plan. Okay. You got to have a plan. And of course, you don't even realize what you need when you first step into this. So, these are some of the things that we learned in our experience, but you gotta reach out to other people. I mean, you got to set up with friends and family, to come and give you a relief. I mean, my sister came, which was great, and my husband was at the house when I needed him, but I never left my mom, rarely. I mean, I maybe went to dinner a few times. My dad would be like, go to dinner, go spend time with your family. But, it was hard to, even when you're away, you're wondering about what is she doing? How are they interacting with her? So the main caregiver never fully gets away, but you got to set up with your family where they come and spend time with her. Or like my brothers would have them over for dinner, and that was a huge help, because at least I had 2 to 3 hours, off, where my mom was safe. I knew she was with my dad and with my family. And so that's important. Things that they can help you with is shopping, cooking meals, taking her to the doctor, taking her and get her hair done. Running errands can sometimes be hard, and a lot depends on the age of your loved one and what their other, if they have any other kind of disability. So any that your family can offload you is huge, but you got to start early. Okay, you got to bring them in the fold. Okay, and it's not easy. Even helping you clean the house, or setting up time off for yourself is crucial. Other things I can do is pick up groceries, pick up the laundry. I mean, there's a lot of things that family members and friends can help with. Okay, so making a plan is important, and again, trying to bring them in, but a lot of, and you can't be shy. That's the hard part. I never really asked for help. I'm not good at asking for help. I don't know how to really do it, but if I could do it all over again, I would have done it. But again, I had my sister was there with me during the day. So we had each other. And then if I needed my husband, I could always go get him. But asking for help is the key. You just got to set it up, get organized, and ask your family and friends to step up early. And here's the thing: they want to do it early, because that's when your loved one is always going to remember them, and they're funny, and they do cute things. And I moved home instantly as soon as my mom was diagnosed, because I wanted to be here when she still knew me, because you don't know, well, how long is she going to know you? There's so many questions out there. But anyway, don't be shy. Ask for help. Very, very important. If your family members don't live close by, then potentially they can help you financially. They can, pay for respite care or daycare, or someone to come in and clean the house. I think it's important that they call and talk to them. They love phone calls, even if you're just telling them that you love them and that you're thinking about them. If you can arrange, to have them come, even once a month is huge, because just knowing that somebody is coming and you're going to have some time off just makes everything easier, for you. But there are ways that they can help you financially, and they can come, and it's just important to try to bring everybody in. The other side is not everybody is a caregiver, and, they don't want to be, and they are resented sometimes when you ask them to be. And so you just have to understand that everybody handles things in a different way. I mean, I'm one of 6 kids. Everybody was different in my family, and but not everybody is a caregiver, nor that they want to be, and you just can't hold it against them. You just can't. And so that's when you got to, but you got to reach out, and you got to get help. Okay. So the next thing is, we're going to talk about is kind of playing offense, and probably what we've been talking about is offense. I just didn't mention it, but so taking care of practical matters. So this is really important, and it's something that all families need to get this stuff in order and have it ready for their kids, because none of these things that, we're going to talk about, especially the legal things, even come into place until the until you are incapacitated. But, I always tell people a drunk could cross the center line tomorrow and hit you. So these things are super critical that you get lined up. You need to have in a certain place, and people need to know where they are your personal papers, your birth records, your marriage and divorce records, your social security cards, your list of medicines. Whoops, sorry, I went too far. Anything, your insurance, if all of your passwords and passcodes to anything, your banking information, you need to put your children, on, or at least one, on your checking account. It's everybody, at least one person, someone you trust, needs to know all of this information and where it is. It's critical, and probably it's even not a bad idea to make copies and give it to them, because sometimes we misplace things, or we think we're being, things get moved, and then you're like, where are these things? Okay. I mean, so some other practical things: your Medicaid card, your list of doctors, your list of medicines, any kind of insurance, really, anything that we're dealing with, health insurance, life insurance, your home insurance, your car insurance, all those different things. It's just important that someone have an idea where they are, who they're with, telephone numbers, passwords, passcodes, all of that stuff is so important. I mean, it's critical. And then, other papers that are very important are, if you have a burial plot, burial insurance, here we go into, your house insurance, car insurance, some of the things that we just talked about. If you have long-term care, you need to give them that insurance, because that's wonderful if you have long-term care, because it's very hard for family members to come in and try to find all this information. So if you can do yourself a favor, and your family, everybody, and do these things now. I don't care if you're 40 years old or if you're 70 years old. These are all things that we need to do, have in place, and someone needs to be aware of it. So there are some legal documents that are very important that everybody needs to have. If you don't have them, you can contact your lawyer, or there's legal aid services. You can even go on the internet and pull all of these things pretty much off of the internet and copy them. But everybody needs to have a living will. Okay. Durable power of attorney for, yourself and your loved one is important. One of the things I've learned is once you turn 18, we think as parents, we can legally make decisions for our kids if they're 20, 25, 28, but it's not true. Once they turn 18, they need to have their own living will and durable power of attorney and things like that. That's important. So it's something that everybody in the family can do together. You just do these things, and then it's all done. So durable power of attorney is over health and medical. And then you can have, durable is medical. Actually, I have a good definition, but it's medical and financial. You know, um, the living will and durable power of attorney for healthcare, really have to do with what kind of healthcare services you want in the future. They're called advanced directives. So like for me, for example, if I was in a bad accident or something tragic happens to me, my advanced directive is they can keep me alive until my family gets there and can tell me goodbye. Don't hook me up to a feeding tube or anything like that. Well, everybody has their own ideas of what they want. So that's what a living will is, and that will help you in your power of attorney, especially your medical power of attorney. It's called an advanced directive. Okay, I think I have good definitions here. Okay, so here we go. Living will. This legal document states her wishes to die a natural death without using heroic means to keep her alive. Okay, it's just everybody has their own thoughts on that. And so that's what the living will is. Then the durable power of attorney for health is just a document that names you, the caregiver, as a person who can make health care choices for her when she no longer is able to give medical consent. So the key here is when they are no longer able to give medical consent. So it scares people when you start doing durable power of attorneys for different things, because I think people feel like they're taking the power away from you, but they're not. You are in full control of yourself, your life, your finances, and your medical until you are no longer capable of doing it. And then at that point, you want someone to step in and help you. It's important, that someone has your back and is helping you during all these situations. So then a durable financial power of attorney is just a legal document that gives you the ability to pay bills and make decisions about their money and property and their choices about these things when they can no longer make sense of it. Okay. Again, what is the key word here? When you can no longer understand what it is that you're doing, then somebody will step in and help you. Just like you would step in and help someone else, you want someone to step in and help you. Don't make it harder than it is. I think that's a big key. And I know it's hard, but just don't make it harder than it is. It's something that we all have to do in life. Okay. So guardianship. This is a different ball game. Guardianship. Okay. So I'm gonna read it to you. Guardianship means that when you have means that you have asked for and have legally chosen by the court to watch over your loved one and make decisions about her money and healthcare needs. Okay. This is often touchy. Okay. So you really don't want to have to do a guardianship unless you absolutely have to. Okay. If they've already taken care of legal papers, durable power of attorney for healthcare, and durable financial power of attorney, guardianship is not required. But when you have to step in and get a guardianship, number one, it's expensive. Okay. And then it has to go all the way to a court. So you're dealing with a court and lawyers who are deciding if you can do this. So you don't want to have to go down this route. And when people do it, a lot of times is when somebody is unfortunately not able to make good decisions anymore in their life, and maybe they have to go into a nursing home or memory care, then you have to get a guardianship. So you have the authority and the ability to do what's right for your loved one and put them into a nursing home or a memory care or whatever the situation may be. Okay. So the key here is do the others, and you don't ever have to get into the guardianship. And then, so the durable financial power of attorney just, gives you the legal document, gives you the right to go in and pay their bills and make decisions about their money and property. Okay. Just go in and do these things. It's so important because you absolutely do not want to get into a guardianship if you don't have to. Okay. So survival tips for the early stage. Okay. Playing offense here. You got to put staying healthy on top of your list. It's very important that you do that. You got to take care of the quarterback. Quarterback's the most important person. You are the most important person in your loved one's life. So you got to take care of yourself. You just have to make it a priority. And then I think it's important that you remember that their disability is short-term memory loss, and really try to understand what that means and know that they're just not going to remember what it is that you just said. And then cannot expect them to remember conversations or activities. You want to always have a backup plan in case something unexpected happens to you. I think this is really important. You've got to have a backup plan. You have to, because things happen. Other family members get sick. I mean, there's just all kind of things. So having a backup plan in case something happens to you or you're pulled away for a little bit is crucial. And then you got to take it one day at a time. You have to have a sense of humor, which is important. We laughed our way through caregiving. We laughed at cute things my mom did. We laughed at silly things that we did. We tried not to take ourselves too seriously, because honestly, this disease is trial and error. You're never going to do it right. And it's important that you not beat yourself up and not be too hard on yourself, because, I always kept 2 filing cabinets on my shoulder. This one was, okay, I tried this and it worked, so I'm going to do it again. This side was, never going to do that again. That was not the reaction I thought I was going to get. And so, you just, that's how you learn. Either it works or it doesn't work, and then you do it again if it works, because usually if it works once, it will work again. But, over here is like, that's when you learn, like, no means no. When they say no, they mean no. It's important. So keep it in humor, giving yourself grace. And somebody is pulling up at my house. I'm actually it's okay, Bailey. I'm gonna shut this door real quick. So it's just so important that you have a sense of humor, and that you don't beat yourself up, and that you try to enjoy every moment that you have with your loved one. I think that's critical. And, today is the best day it's going to be, and love them and cherish them. And gosh, it's a time to say everything you want to say to them. And, pat yourself on the back, and you're doing the best job that you do. And, you're not going to do it perfect. Again, I've said that, multiple times. This is hard, and you're going to cry, and you're going to laugh, and just, this is a season. And I like to say that, there's a difference between, let's see, how do I say this? Hard and impossible. There are some things that are impossible, but most things in life are just hard, so you have to ask yourself, is this hard or is this impossible? And then, again, most of the things are just hard, but, life is what you make it. And so you just have to have a good attitude, give yourself grace, and have a sense of humor. You will get through this disease. See, it is 3:20. I'm going to go just a little bit long. Quickly, I'm going to start kind of going into, we're still in the early stage, playing defense. Okay. This is a new PowerPoint, so I apologize about that. So playing defense. So does it matter if you're a spouse, a child, a grandchild, sister, brother, or friend of a person with this disease? This is now the time to love her, and with everything you've got, which is what I was just talking about a little bit. You want to be with them while she can. It's important to make memories. There are different things that you can do, just spending time with them, that they love that. But you can make a scrapbook. You can take pictures of the two of you, and it's something you can pull out and show them. Pictures are great. Words are great. Writing them hard is something that they can go back and read over and over, because again, their disability is short-term memory loss. So, especially with my dad, we would give him cards, and he would just go through and read them. And he loved it, because it was like the first time that he'd ever read them. Old pictures, and, sharing old stories. And, those are such fun things, that you can do. And what's really great is, stories that they share with you over and over and over. There are times where, like, I wish they would tell a different story, but when they're not able to communicate as well as, later on in the disease, you take those stories that they told you a lot, and it will put a smile on their face, so you can, use those things. But let her and the grandkids, or drawings that the grandkids do. I mean, there's all kind of things that you can do. Creating memory boxes. You know, a fun thing that especially with a woman is, you know, you can get things that they love, you know, from the past and make like a shadow box, or, you know, things, get their little booties, you know, because they generally all have those, and or prayer beads or bits of jewelry, and, you know, and you can make things with them, and then it's something that they can hold later because it has different textures, and sometimes those work really good. But any kind of activity like that, I think is important to do. Just, you know, the main thing is you're creating memories, and you know, memories for her, you know, but memories for yourself that you will look at. And I will tell you that this disease is hard. But now, you know, my mom's been gone 16 years, which is hard to even fathom that. And my dad's been gone almost 4. And you do get to a point to where you forget them with Alzheimer's, that you remember you know, I think that's important to know, because it's pretty difficult in the beginning, you know, because that's what you tend to think of. But you know, your memories do go back to the good ones, I guess is the point I want to say. But creating these memories with them is fun. You know, you just got to look at it as, it's almost like entertaining children in some respects. You think of activities and things that they can do, and then have fun with it, you know, especially if they like to do flowers. You can get all kind of flowers from your yard, or you can dry them out and make all kind of creations. I mean, there's a lot of fun things that you can do. So you want to keep life simple. And so this is, you know, we're gonna go to just a little bit. The best advice I can give you about driving, okay, is you blame it on the doctor. You know, you have the doctor write a prescription that states that they cannot drive. And so what my mom, you know, in my, we know you can drive, but because you're taking this medicine, you know, if you were to have an accident and if they find out that you're on this medicine, they can sue you because you're not supposed to drive on the medicine, you know. But actually, you know, you don't want to take responsibility. You always want to put it on the doctor, and you don't want to really use these. Honestly, you never want to mention the word Alzheimer's to them ever, in my opinion. I mean, once they're diagnosed, I would always use the dementia. It's just a kind of word. And if they experienced it or had anyone in their life deal with it, then, you know, it's frightening. It's very frightening to people. And so I would not ever even mention it. Always use the word dementia if you have to use it. And those are things that we can talk about personally, you know, or, you know, I mean, at another time. But you always want to just say that, you know, it's the doctor. This is what the doctor recommends. A lot of times, if they've had, you know, a stroke or another issue, a surgery causes, I mean, best advice I can give you at this point is don't ever go under anesthesia, especially if you're old. Make them do a block, because a lot of people I work with are people that have had surgery and the anesthesia has just thrown them into another world. And so, but you can use those things too as reasons, you know, well, you had a stroke and you're on this medicine and you can't drive. You always want to keep it positive, you know, as best that you can, but you always also too want to blame it on the doctor. Then that takes the blame off of you. They can't get angry with you. And then there's other tricks like letting the air out of the tires, you know, undoing a spark plug. I mean, different things where the car can't stop, you know, I mean, start, excuse me. And then with my, we just played a game. We'd be like, well, Mrs. Broyles, where would you like to go today? You know, and I would open the car door for her and close the door, her seatbelt, and just kind of made it a game and fun. She liked that. So it was fairly easy. In the beginning, you can let them drive a little bit, but more and more, you just take over driving, and that also makes it easy. Most women are easier than men. Men just don't want to give it up, and understand that. It's their independence. So let's see. Let's check our time. Okay. So communication. We kind of talked about this. Let's go into we kind of talked a little bit about them substituting words. They really don't know that they're substituting words. I think it's interesting because I had an early onset gentleman, got it in his 40s, and his wife was telling me that she kept saying, "Honey, you're substituting words," and he'd be like, "I'm not substituting words." And then one day his granddaughter told him he was, and he believed her. And so he goes, "Really have no idea that I'm substituting words." My mom did a lot, um, but really, when I think when you're communicating with them, it's just so important to always kind of have a smile on your face and looking them in the eye. It's important that they know that you're listening to them. And again, with my mom, when she couldn't finish a sentence, we could finish it for her. She didn't mind. So a lot of that is individual, but when their disability is short-term memory loss, many times they start a thought and then they can't finish it. And so a lot of times you can kind of probe it, ask them a question, to try to gain that thought back. But a lot of times, they just don't remember. And so I always just change the subject. And I always with my mom, I'd go, I just can't remember anything. What was I saying? I can't remember what I was saying, just because it makes them feel better a lot of times. And I would laugh and just go, between the two of us, we have half a brain. I just would make a lot of it and make a joke, and she would too, most of the time. So really, as a disease, progresses, their communication changes a lot. And it's becomes harder for them to keep track on what they're saying. Here's the key. The key is they live in the moment. Okay. And so really, from a caregiver standpoint, all you care about is the moment that she's in. And I'm going to flip to something else here a little bit, but I like to call it creative communication. And a lot of people will call it, therapeutic lying. This is a big point, so I'm going to stay here for a second. When my mother was diagnosed, one of the first things the nurse told me was, she said, "You'll learn to be a good liar." And after I'd hung up, and I was replaying the conversation in my mind, I thought, what did she mean by that? I forgot to come back and ask her. And so, it didn't take too long, until you realize I tried. My mom, she every day, she said to me, "What's wrong with me?" I would cry. And I'd say, "Well, BB, you had a stroke and it affected your short-term memory," which is what they told us forever. So we never changed that. And I said, but I'd always say, but you're beautiful and you're healthy. And, then one day I said to her, "And you know what, BB, you're taking this medicine and you're getting better every day." And I went, "Oh, I just lied to my mother." And then my mom looked at me and she said, "Oh, thank you." And she quit crying. And I thought, it worked. And then I thought, that's what the nurse was talking about, And so I like to say it's creative communication, because your job as a caregiver is to say whatever it is you have to say in that moment, okay? Because we're talking about they live moment to moment to moment. So what you do in this moment is going to determine this moment down here. So all you're thinking about right now is this moment. And honestly, from a caregiver standpoint, what you want to do is you want to say whatever it is you have to say in that moment, okay, to keep them calm, happy, and safe. It's all you care about, okay, because they're not going to remember. They're not going to remember what it is. So if they say to you, like, I'll give you an example. Like my mom, she said one day, she said, does my mom, does she know I'm here? See, now I understand that means she's in her adolescence. She's frightened. Okay. She's a little bit afraid because she doesn't know where she is. And what do our children want when they're afraid? They want their mother and they want to go home. Okay. So when she said that to me, I wasn't that smart back then, but I knew that I had to come up with something realistic. And so I said, well, BB, your mom called about 30 minutes ago and she said that she has to work late tonight. So She wants you to spend the night with me. Isn't that great? We're going to have so much fun. We're going to watch a movie. We're going to eat some chocolate. We're just going to have a ball. Even though, she wasn't quite sure that she believed, what I was saying, she went with it because it was positive. So it's really important that you keep things positive. Okay. And then when you're being creative in communication, you got to look at them straight in the eye. You got to believe what you're saying. It has to be real. Okay. It has to be something that could have happened, and it takes at least 8 to 10 sentences to change a thought process. Okay. This is something you do throughout the whole disease, because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to harp on this point. It's kind of called redirecting too. Okay. You're redirecting that thought process away from my mother, away from her mother. Okay. Because now she's a little bit, so what's going on in her mind from a caregiver standpoint, from her standpoint? She's a little bit afraid. She doesn't really, she's in the valley. She doesn't quite understand really where she is or what she's supposed to be doing. That's the big thing. What am I supposed to be doing? And then, so what did she do is she asked me, does her mom know that that she's there? So perception is real. Okay. She believes in that moment that she's young and she's wanting her mother. Okay. So from my standpoint, from a caregiver, okay, that's where she is mentally. And so from my standpoint, from a caregiver, is I don't want to say to her, well, your mother died 10 years ago. Okay, because she's just going to start crying, and she's not going to believe. It's going to make her angry. So what is our goal here as a caregiver is we want to keep them happy, we want to keep them calm, and we want to keep them safe. Okay, so what you have to do is, and this is where it gets a little tricky, and this is something that you get better at as the disease progresses. I mean, because you do it all the time, so you get better at it. And so what I did is I chose to say, well, Mom, your mom is working, because her mother had a job, you see. So I could use that. Well, it's getting late in the day. So I said, oh, you know what? Your mom just called, and she said that she has to work late tonight, and she wants you to spend the night with me. And then I turned it into a positive. Isn't that great? We're going to have so much fun. We're going to watch a movie and eat some pop. We're going to eat some chocolate, whatever it is. Your loved ones, their likes and their dislikes. So you use those things to your advantage. So I talked about sweets, chocolate. My mom loved chocolate, and so what I'm doing by saying that is I'm trying to keep her calm. I don't want her to get upset. She's frightened. I can see it in her eyes. Okay. Anytime they ask you to go home or they want their mother, they're afraid in that moment. Okay. They're looking for a safe place. Okay. That's what that means. And so, during this creative conversation that we're having, and so my mom, even though she wasn't quite sure that she believed me in that moment, she's looking at me. So you got to sell it. You got to be positive. You got to have positive body language. You got to be looking her straight in the eye. But because it was positive and it was realistic, then she was okay with it. Okay. Again, all we care about is the moment that we're in. Okay. Now let's backtrack for a minute. If I had said to her, well, your mother died 10 years ago, she would have gone, what? She died? And she would have been devastated. Okay. Because she's looking for her mother. She's afraid. And so, and so definitely don't want to say that. Okay. Now there are, when someone has died, that's a whole different situation. So there are ways that you can say things to them if they've lost their spouse. That's another conversation. But there are things that you can say, okay? But in that situation, of course, I'm just trying to navigate through the disease at this point too, okay? But it worked. So I'm learning that this creative communication works, and then it keeps her calm, and then because her disability is short-term memory loss, then that thought is gone. I'm trying to redirect her into that thought. And then at that next point, I say, why don't we go get, and then I would say a milkshake or a cookie, or, ooh, let's go let's go get something good, and so that changes her thought process into something else, away from her mother. That's all you're trying to do. And I have caregivers who say, I will never lie to my wife, and I'm like, I get it. I understand that that's hard, but you can't look at it like that. It's just part of the disease. All you're trying to do is redirect the thought process into something else, away from whatever it is that's getting ready to cause a behavioral change, because they're upset. We don't want to upset them. We want to keep them as calm and happy and peaceful as possible. When they're happy, we're happy, And so, anyway, that's a whole nother, I mean, I can talk about this one topic. So communication is my favorite thing to talk about. I have a whole, hour, at least hour-long speech. I do a lot on communication. That's how important it is with this disease. You have to learn how to communicate. It's critical. You can't argue with them. You can't correct them. It's just better. It's just better to agree with it, whatever it is that they say, and then do whatever you are going to do anyway. That's something that we learned in this process. But you don't ever want to talk about negative things. You want to keep things very matter of fact and or positive, because our brains process things differently. Positive things one way and negative things another way. And for whatever reason, they hold on to negative things. It's crazy. I used to think, how can my mom or my dad still remember that was 3 days ago, but it was negative, and they hold on to negative. So you just don't want to, they're kind of on a need to know basis. You just don't want to discuss anything negative with them anymore. You just don't. And so, keep things positive, but you want to speak calmly, in your sentence with something positive. Again, I learned in this process, and it's around communication, if you take you out of your vocabulary and you add we into it, then it made a big difference. For example, I'd say, well, Bibi, why don't we go into the bathroom and brush our teeth? I would go in the bathroom with her. I'd put toothpaste on her toothbrush. I'd put toothpaste on mine. I'd hand it to her. We'd start brushing our teeth. And even if I did, and if maybe she was in the valley in that moment and she wasn't quite sure what she was supposed to do with her toothbrush, she would look at me and then she would mimic me. They will mimic you for a long time. It's very interesting. And so, if I had just handed my mom her toothbrush and she was in the valley and she wasn't quite sure what to do with it, she might have done her eyebrows, or she might have brushed her hair with it, because she just wasn't sure, that's part of that cognitive abilities. She wasn't, a lot of times they're not sure what to do. So that's why you want to do things with them as long as you can, not for them, because a time comes when you have to do things for them. So, okay, I'm going to, I've been talking a long time. So do you want to, I know that we had talked about doing some question and answering,
Thank you, Betsy, for being here with us today. And we are just going to do some follow-up questions. So the first one I know some of the folks we work with don't really have a lot of family support. And so I was wondering if there was any respite services that folks might be able to have to help with that relief of, getting some time alone.
Sure. Okay, so the Episcopal Church on Dixon Street, it has a respite. They have a respite care once a week on Thursdays, and you can take your loved one there. I think it's only like $10, but it's from like 9:30 to like 2:30 or 3, and they get lunch. And so we were very fortunate. We've had a respite grant through DHS. So I'm almost, unfortunately, have spent my money. And so I know that we will get another one, but it may not be till August. But there are, you could reach out to the Area Agency on Aging and visit with them. They can reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. There's Alzheimer's Arkansas. There's Schmeeding. I know Alzheimer's Arkansas. I feel like Schmeeding probably did too, and probably the Alzheimer's Association. I feel quite certain all probably got these respite grants too, because it was through the state of Arkansas, and so they can reach out to them and ask, if they got those grants, because it's important, to be able to get away.
Yeah, I've known lots of people who I feel like they're doing it alone, and so I wanted to make sure they had some support that way. Do either of y'all have another question for her? Go ahead, Nicole.
I just have a question. I'm just wondering, some of the things that you were identifying, it made me think if I had Alzheimer's, because I can't find my car, I can't do this, and I can't do that. I mean, and just on the real side of it, it does become a point in time to where it's not just little simple things that you're forgetting, that it becomes very obvious that there's something going on. And in a lot of families, talking about these things it's not very easy, and it's not always welcomed.
Right.
And so families do the whole thing of sweeping it under the rug, or everyone overcompensates for things. What are your tips for someone that possibly thinks that it might be happening because they recognize it? How do you, I mean, I know you can't tiptoe around it, but what's the best way to get family together to talk about something like this?
Yeah, it's really hard. And there is a huge denial factor with everybody. I mean, even like when my dad, when he was developing the disease, and I picked up on it really early because, because I was so familiar with it, and, he would do something and say something. We were traveling, my daughter and dad, now we traveled around the country and we trained. And when, being out of his element, he would do something, and I would look at my daughter and I would say, did he just say that? Did he just do that? It was devastating to me. And, I knew it here, but I could not accept it here. I mean, it took me forever. And then when I tried to tell my family, nobody believed me except my sister, And so, the hard part too is spouse protects spouse. They protect each other from the children. They hide it. It's sad that there's such a negative thing about it, and they hide it. And so, the best thing you can do is, and it's hard, but someone has to kind of take charge and say, we've got to come together as a family and try to at least see, and this is where I think it's important, because a lot of times there are other underlying circumstances that are causing them to behave that way. So just getting them to the doctor and having a good physical sometimes can show that it's a blood sugar issue, or it's cardiovascular. They need, they've got clogged arteries. They need to go in and do a stent. Things that are not that difficult to do, but make a huge difference in your ability to think. And so I think it's important to get them to a doctor. And I've vacillated on different things through the years, but I think it is important to get them to the doctor and see, if there is a cognitive issue. And just because they have a form of dementia doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have Alzheimer's, and so I think that that's important too. Alzheimer's is just the most common, but people can have dementia, and there's all different types. There's like, there's alcohol-induced dementia from people who drank a lot, but that's more dementia and not Alzheimer's, So there's a lot of different things, but someone has to take charge, and someone, number one, has to accept it.
Someone has to be the bad person, not the bad person, but the good person, the person that, is just in your face, that we're not going to just let this slip by to the point to where we don't handle our business. And that's the thing that would probably be the most fearful when I've had a friend go through that situation. When it's all said and done, it's progress, and whether or not you accept it or not, this will happen.
Right. That's exactly right. And here's the key. And, I have friends that, really good friends of mine that, really kind of frustrate me, because what they did is, like you say, they just, here's the key sometimes, if they accept it, then they have to do something about it. And that's where people are busy, and, they have their own lives, and they're doing their own things, and they don't want to get involved. But here's the key. It just takes neighbors watch neighbors, especially elderly people, you know, and they keep an eye out, and then they start noticing things, you know, and then, you know, what you have to be careful about is neglect. You know, if there are signs and you're neglecting to do anything about it, and then something happens, an accident, because accidents happen, then, you know, you don't ever want to be charged with any kind of neglect, because most people would and never let it get to that point, but they don't know it, they don't want to see it, they don't do anything about it, and then one day something happens. So to me, that's the worst problem, and that's what I say to people. I'll go, you know, you can't leave her at home. You know, there comes a point where you've got to have someone in there, at least with her, you know, part of the time, because she cannot stay at home alone anymore. If you're not going to do anything about, you got to at least get somebody there, a family member or something, because, you know, that's a big deal. Elder abuse is what they call it, you know, and so that's a really big deal, and it's just hard. You know, it's hard. It's the realization and the accepting of it that people, you know, they just don't want to see it. Everybody goes through some form of denial. It's very normal, but it's just, how long are you going to go through it?
Yes, and I think you made an awesome point about how husband and wives will kind of accommodate for each other, and then when you have the death of a spouse, it becomes more apparent that there's a problem, because the spouse was always the one, you know, reminding or on top of them for doing things, and now they're not quite capable of doing that. So I appreciate you for sharing. Yes.
You know, and it's funny how that generation, you know, they did, the men, a lot of them did everything. And the women, you know, they don't know how to do anything. And when they get sick, it's really bad, because they don't know how to do anything. And it's, you know, that's why I was kind of harping earlier about someone has to know what you have, you know, your insurance policy, your what, all of your financial and medical information, and house, you know, someone has to be aware of what it is, what your passwords are, who even your insurance is with, because when something happens, you know, people are lost and they have no clue on what to do. And that's, I see that more often, you know, as of late. It's interesting. So I think it's good that you're doing that. You told me you're doing a whole I don't know, series or a Zoom on that. And I think that's really commendable.
Thank you.
Kirsten, for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Kirsten, did you have a question?
Yeah. So as far as like when an individual gets into a really frustrating, like you can just tell that it's building, they're getting really, really frustrated, and you know, you can't just kind of completely take yourself out of the situation to leave them alone per se, but as far as with your experiences, how did you kind of resolve that? I mean, I know avoiding certain things and everything, but the moment right there where it's really built up, I've just had a couple clients that have reached out about specifics like that. And it's most likely with just the cognition, the frustration that they're not able to do certain things. They're aware, but they're not. How did you kind of?
Well, I mean, if I got really frustrated, I just walked away. I said, "Excuse me, Mom, I'm going to run to the bathroom, or I'm going to run get something to drink. I'll be right back." I would just walk out of the room. I'd get a pillow and scream, you know, into the pillow, or you just like, you gotta do something to get that anxiety, because you do get tired. It is hard to be calm and patient all the time. I mean, an impossibility. Okay, I'll just put it that way. Nobody can be all the time. And so, you know, and that's why it's important to try to get help, even if it's just, you know, one weekend, you know, a month, or just anytime, even an hour can make a difference. But you know, one of the things that I would try to do too is that, you know, I recommend is when they're sitting and watching TV, you know, you can get you know, if you get arm weights, but even like soup cans or jugs of milk, and just do some exercise.
Right.
Just using that energy into something makes you better, makes you sleep better, you know, but doing something, you know, you can hold the chair and do squats, you know, you push-ups. There's things exercise wise that really makes a difference. I wish I would have done it. I did it better, you know, with my dad, but you know, but it's hard. I would literally take a shower and I would just cry my eyes.
Right. Just release.
Nobody could hear me. Maybe they could, I don't know. But I would generally go back and I would just cry and cry and cry because it's hard, you know. And then what I did is, so I'll bring you some playbooks, but in the back of the playbook, there's a poem. Somebody sent this to, I think my sister actually found it, and we cut it and we had it taped to my mother's bathroom window because my mother lost the ability to read very early, very tragic. She was a reader, you know, and so I'll read it to you. Let's see how much time we got. Well, anyway.
We'll wrap it up with this. Go ahead.
Okay, so it says, don't ask me to remember. Don't try to make me understand. Let me rest and know you're with me. Kiss my cheek and hold my hand. I'm confused beyond your concept. I am sad and sick and lost. All I know is that I need you to be with me at all cost. Do not lose your patience with me. Do not scold or curse or cry. I can't help the way I'm acting. Can't be different though I try. Just remember that I need you, that the best of me is gone. Please don't fail to stand beside me. Love me till my life is done. And then I would cry. So I would read this and it would snap me back into reality because I often thought if my mother could say something to me, this is what she would say. I can't help this. You know, please don't get frustrated at me. If I could change it, I would. And so I would go in there and I would read this and then I'd just cry. You know, and then I would be like, okay, I can do that. You know, I'd take, of course, 4 or 5 deep breaths, you know, really will bring blood pressure down, you know. I think you have something you want to add?
One of the things I'd like to point out that you did talk about was redirecting. And I know my background is in human development and family studies. So we talk about from birth all the way to, you know, to death. But one of the things when you're dealing with children at various ages, sometimes it's really easy to get them distracted on something else. So I would assume that sometimes when you're handling difficult behaviors, if you can do things like, oh yeah, remember we were supposed to go walk to the mailbox today. You know, you become a good liar, kind of like what you said.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. You know, no. What you just said, really, I've never even thought about that example. So that's a good one, honestly, because anything like that, a sudden, you know, like if I went, oh, BB, you know, just doing that alone, she'd go, it would startle her just for a second because it was kind of a big gesture. Oh, BB, or I'd clap my hand, I'd go, BB. And then I'd be thinking, come up with something in a hurry, you know, and then I'd say, why don't we, you know, go get a milkshake, or why don't we go get a cookie, or why don't we go, you know, but, you know, oh, we're supposed to go get the mail. I mean, that's a good one. Anything, any kind of redirection like that is great. You know, that's perfect. But it's just like with children, you know, it's you do it all the way through the disease. I mean, you have to just learn to do it. It's just part of it. I tell people, if this were cancer, it's a chemo. It's one of your chemotherapies is redirection and creative communication. I mean, it's just part of the disease. You can't be effective and a good caregiver without it.
And I like your point also, I know we're about to close, is giving yourself, I know people refer to it as a timeout, but I've read some things of giving yourself a time in. So it's giving myself time to breathe, to collect my thoughts, to realize that, wait a minute, I just need to step back for a second, that my family will be okay for a little bit. I'm gonna take 5, you know. A lot of times you would hear parents say go to the bathroom and act like they're sitting, you know, doing their business or whatever, but actually they're just sitting there and enjoying that little bit of time they have to themselves. So we have to give ourselves permission to do some of those things.
Absolutely. Well, we have a whole nother talk on taking care of
I know, right? It's so sad we have to end today, but I'm just so excited that we get to do this again and how we appreciate
We're
you.
on. I'm honored to help you guys
Process.
any way that I can. I love to talk on it. I kind of ramble sometimes, but I love it. You know.
No, that's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us, and we hope to see you in the future, maybe one of our second and third ones that we're doing. And I appreciate all the information you shared. It really helped me, and I think it helped them out too. So thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, I'll bring you some playbooks.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
all for joining our webinar today. And if you happen to have any questions that weren't addressed during the webinar, if you'll please email those, we'll make sure that we have that information online so you can email us your questions and maybe we can address those at another time. Thank you all for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.